The first live stream of 2022, there's plenty of new stuff happening this year. Eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed the rebrand that we've used this event as the launch date for. There's nothing like a deadline. As well as this monthly webinar, we'll be launching a new Top Tips series in April. These will be 30-minute skills-focused sessions, focusing on things like email marketing, YouTube advertising, social media analytics, and social media advertising. But that's all for the future. Let's talk about tonight. Is it just me, or does that sound like a song you'd hear on a country music channel? Tonight we're talking about freelancing, and we've got two great guests to tell us about their own experience. That'll hopefully help you decide whether freelancing or running your own business is the right move for you. Let's go inside and meet our guests. Okay, here we go with the 2022 live series. So for our guests tonight, on my left we have Francesca Morelli, who is Enterprise Development Coordinator at Queen's University and also the co-founder of Vava Influence, an influencer marketing agency based here in Belfast. And then on my right here we have Josh McAvoy, who is the co-founder of a digital animation studio here in Belfast called Aura. So thanks very much for joining us for the first one of 2022. I suppose if we can kick off, Francesca, if you want to tell us a little bit about the business and what it is you do for your customers.
Of course. So at Vava Influence, we are Northern Ireland's first influencer marketing agency dedicated exclusively to influencer marketing. Beforehand, it was sort of under the umbrella of maybe PR and comms. So we decided there was really a gap for an agency dedicated to influencers specifically. So basically what we do is if a business wants to work with influencers, we set it up. So generally it's a B2C business or B2B2C. And we can service any business who sells directly to customers, whether that be in hospitality and catering, whether that be in fashion and retail, whether that be e-commerce. Any service or product that is bought by consumers. So we work in gifting, we work in sponsored campaigns, and we also work in events. So that's a bit about what I do.
Okay. And Josh, if you want to tell us a little bit about Aura and where that all started.
Yeah, put very simply, we're an animation studio, so we create animated content for SMEs to effectively tell the stories that they need to tell. So that comes down to brands, it comes down to narrative stories, things like that.
Okay, and then Fran, I mean, I suppose anyone watching in Northern Ireland will be familiar with the Morelli name and it has nice associations for most people. So I was interested to know, was it that exposure to the family business that made you want to pursue a career in freelancing or working for yourself?
Actually not at all. Growing up in a family business, anyone that has been exposed to the catering and hospitality industry will understand that it's really long hours, it's really hard work. If you own your own catering business, you do have to be there. So growing up, my parents were non-stop working. My dad was non-stop stressed between staff and the running of the shop generally. His only day off was Christmas Day, really, the only day that we're closed. And so growing up, I always envisioned myself working in a corporate, working for somebody else. Really, my dad telling me, don't run your own business. But it was one of those things where I noticed a gap in the market that I knew had to be filled, and that if we didn't fill it, someone else was going to come along and do it. So I suppose I kind of fell into entrepreneurship rather than pursued it actively.
Is there something in that about... even though you say you looked at it from the outside and thought, that looks like really flipping hard work, there's something obviously within you and anybody who does this that they can't help themselves, really. Is there an element, do you think, that you're either built to do this or you're not?
Well, I feel like a lot of people probably look at starting up your own business and think, God, how did people even do that? How do you go about that? Is that even doable for somebody like me? And in 2017, I actually spent a year in Paris for my placement year, and I was based in a startup studio. So I was working with a number of entrepreneurs that were building tech startups. And I suppose being in that environment for a year, I saw them build businesses from the ground up. And so with my family background and the experience in Paris, I learned how to run your own business and how to start up. And so that was really a nice contrast between a business that was established for 100 years versus businesses that were really just starting out. And I sort of realised, there is this, I suppose, fear around it for a lot of people, but it is actually very doable with the right skills, the right knowledge, and the right people around you.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about then. I mean, Chloe's your co-founder in the agency. Can you tell us a little bit about how the business idea came about with Chloe and how you met each other and how it led then to the creation of the agency?
Of course. So Chloe and I actually met through another business in Belfast. We weren't friends first. We were business partners first. We were brought on board as part of a tech startup team, and we were a team of 5. And Chloe and I, being the same age and similar interests, we just became friendly, and she started taking me to her gigs. And what I mean by that is that Chloe was always involved in the sort of blogging and social media influencer background, and various businesses were asking her to come down and trial out their products and leave reviews, etc., produce social media content. So she started asking me would I go with her, which obviously I did. So we were going to various events and restaurants, and it was great. But by going to those things with her, I noticed very quickly that the whole scene was still very informal, very casual. Payments, briefs, contracts, it was all done very informally. And one day I went to Chloe, I said, does nobody manage you? And she said, well, there's a lot of bloggers here in Belfast, and we all sort of do our own thing, but no one really manages us exclusively, really. We just do it, as I say, quite casually. So I went, right, there's a gap there. Why don't we do it? I have the business background. You have the social media influencer background. We have the knowledge. We have the backgrounds. Why don't we do this together? And here we are 2 years later.
Okay, moving on to you, Josh, then. I mean, we were talking before. You were saying you've been freelancing since you were 15. What was it at that age that made you decide that was something you wanted to do?
I think it was, there were a lot of people who surrounded me with really entrepreneurial mindsets at the time. And at the time I was in high school, so I was interacting with all these people. And, some of them started, fixing mobile phones, just, out of their bedroom for people and making a little bit of money. At the time I was studying A-level art. So I was sort of looking at what they were doing and what I was doing, and realized that, okay, well, it is a marketable thing that I'm doing, so why don't I just do that? Also, because my only other source of income at the time was doing chores, and I hated doing the dishes. So, I started doing commissions. I started going online, looking at people who needed logos done. I was severely underpricing myself. Like, I was doing stuff for like 20 quid, but at the time that was a lot of money. So I started off then around 15. And then
and then moving on to the current business then, can you tell us about how that idea came about?
Yeah, put simply, COVID. If you told me like 3 years ago that I'd be running a business, I would have laughed you out of town. It was not something I'd ever considered. I studied business studies in high school and dropped out after the first semester. I hated it. I hated it completely. And now I'm here. So basically, over our placement year, similar to yourself, I guess, we were looking for opportunities, basically, and COVID meant that a lot of places started pulling out last minute. So we were just sitting there watching all this opportunity just fading away, and we decided, you know what, it's not going to be given to us. We need to make it ourselves. So, we sat down in my friend and co-founder Eva's living room and just decided, let's go for it. Initially we were going to look at just making a short film and doing the company like that. And then a whole bunch of opportunities at uni opened up. So enterprise placement year opened up.
Yeah, the enterprise placement year is a really interesting one. I mean, I know Jackie Smith is one of the regular attendees to these, great, so she'll appreciate the mention for the EPY, which is where I actually saw you speaking about the business. Can you give us a little bit of background into what that enterprise placement year involves and how helpful it was for you?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about it is that it gets a whole bunch of really like-minded people together under the banner of protection that was the likes of Jackie and, Chris and all those ones. And their knowledge really, really helps as well. Because, I mean, starting off as a student who's never run a company, you don't know what you don't know. So having people there to sort of guide you and show you what you're doing is really helpful. And then also just, starting up, you're you're setting your little boat out into choppy waters. So having people around you who are going through the same kind of stuff are there to sort of speak to you and hold your hand a little bit through the whole process just makes it a little bit more bearable, I guess. So I have all the time in the world for the EPOI team, really do. I mention them every time I'm out. They're great.
No, it's a fantastic program. It's one, that obviously didn't exist in the midst of time whenever I was lucky enough to be a student, which was a long time ago. I want to touch a little bit on the co-founder thing now, because you're both co-founders in your business. So if we can start with you, Fran, can you tell us about what you see as the major advantages of that model, of having other people essentially who are as invested as you are in the business right from the very start?
Yeah, and there's having other people, and then there's having other people with different skills to you, and that's the most important thing. So Chloe and I were so lucky in this partnership that we founded, because Chloe is so creative. She has a fine arts degree. She is brilliant at aesthetics and party planning and fun, creative things, whereas I'm quite... I don't want to say serious, that sounds bad, but I suppose I do all the invoicing and sales and admin, but like Chloe hates all that. We submitted a tender recently and Chloe was out doing all the fun video stuff to make it really come to life, and I was writing it, and so we really complement each other's skills, and we have those skills that are necessary for our business, so really complementary. And I suppose if I was going to give advice to anybody starting up their own business, it's find a co-founder who has skills that you don't have, and try and get someone that complements you in that way. Apart from that, she cuts my workload in half and I cut hers in half. And that's so important in the early days of your business when you're trying to be everything to everyone. So yeah, we're very lucky, and now we're even more lucky that our workload has outgrown us too, and we've had to look to other people to help. So yeah, having a co-founder is great, and I'd really recommend it to anybody who's considering starting up their own business.
Your experience is similar to that, I think, Josh, from our previous conversations, isn't
definitely. Going off the back of that, having people who are there to sort of like supplement the stuff that you maybe aren't as good at doing or don't like doing as well. Because I think a lot of startups maybe haven't started up because people have realized I have to do this and I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. When there could be someone out there who's just as good and likes doing the stuff that you don't like doing. So I think finding someone to do that, is great. Additionally, also like having someone to keep you accountable as well. I think early on, whenever I was freelancing myself, it was like the thoughts of the client were what was keeping me accountable, having to present stuff to them and then, money being involved. But I think when you're on bigger projects and you're, producing a short film or an advert that, takes maybe a month or 2 months to do, it's nice having someone there in the fray with you, like who knows what you're doing, so that you can like bounce ideas back and forth. Or like,
it's funny, when we spoke about this before, I mentioned, I personally don't think it matters what age you decide to start your own business, that the learning process is the same. I've experienced all the things that we will talk about later, regarding all the difficulties and all the learning points. One of the things I was looking forward to most when I started this business, I was 42 at the time, was being my own boss. And subconsciously, without even realizing I was doing it, actually within about 6 months of starting the business, I started actively seeking out people who I could use, because I didn't have a co-founder, it was me, actively seeking people that I could use to bounce those ideas off and who I could be accountable to. So whereas I thought myself that one of the big attractions was, for the first time in my working life of 25 years, I will not have a boss. Whenever that accountability was removed, I actually very quickly tried to replace it. So I think it's whatever approach you take, I think, whether you decide to go down the route of going yourself or establishing with a co-founder, I think having some accountability mechanism somewhere, it sounds like it is universally something that we'd all recommend.
It's funny you mention that sort of concept of being your own boss. I follow an amazing entrepreneur called Grace Beverly. She's the founder of Tala and Shreddy. She's amazing. And she put it really well, I thought, a few weeks ago. She said, you're not your own boss, your customers are your boss, your suppliers are your boss, your employees are your boss, you're always answering to somebody, even if you are your own boss, and I thought that was a good point.
It's interesting, If anyone in the audience, I mean, you touched a little bit on this, but I mean, if anyone in the audience was actively thinking about going down the co-founder route because they were aware of complementary skills that they were trying to pull together, what advice would you give them when they're seeking that out? Because I mean, there are examples of where it has all ended horribly because the co-founder relationship just hasn't been as good as it needed to be. What would you think? Do you think there needs to be a previous relationship of a period of time there in order for that to work, and to know, so that the required level of trust, I suppose, is there between everybody, that everybody's, fighting the same battles and on the same page?
It's a really interesting one. I've had a few experiences myself. I don't think you necessarily have to have had a previous relationship, but what I would advise is that you don't rush into jumping into a business agreement with somebody. It's like jumping into a marriage. You wouldn't marry somebody had you only known them 5 minutes. So it's one of those things. I think that what's been really beneficial to me and Chloe actually is that we were business partners first. Because if it all went head over heels tomorrow, then, we have a friendship now, but we didn't before.
Okay.
Sometimes I compare it to moving in with housemates. Sometimes I find that when you've moved in with somebody that's your friend, then by the end of the year, you're enemies. You hate each other, right?
Oh, it's all those little habits.
It's all the little things
that
you don't realise that they had before you moved in with them, right? But if you move in with people that you don't actually know, there's no friendship there to really destroy in the first place, so it kind of works out better. That makes it sound really negative, but what I would say is that with picking a co-founder, you just have to be super careful, and you don't want to rush into making a big, serious agreement with regards to a business, because those things can get very messy, they can get very expensive, and relationships can be destroyed. So what I would say is just approach with caution.
Okay. Yeah. What about you, Josh? What's your...
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Like, especially whenever, like, it's all well and good, like, being in a partnership with someone for a business, but when it becomes like a limited company, then legal ramifications come into things. That muddies the water a bit.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, I don't think I would be sitting here if it wasn't for my co-founders. Equally, I don't think I had ever worked on a project with either of them in the past. We were on the same university course, and I think we just got to talking. We were friends before, so the trust was there. But looking back, like, I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for their involvement. 100%.
So it's an element, it sounds like, in yours, Josh, that the circumstances around COVID and placements being cancelled just happened to put you all in the same place.
Pretty much.
And from that, it was just organically, it sort of grew that, okay, well, maybe there's something that we can try here.
Well, it goes to that, like, phrase, isn't it? Like, necessity breeds innovation. And I think in my mindset, I don't know about my co-founders, but in my mindset, I had two options. Either I, do this, go ham, try my best at it and see what happens, or I just sit on my ass for a year and a half and let whatever comes come. Like,
that I mean, from the conversations I've had with you, Josh, I don't think that was ever really an option.
No, definitely not. I mean, it goes back to what you said about, like, it being in your blood. I think it just goes to show that me, starting doing this kind of thing as early as I did, it is there. And I think I have this sort of drive that I need to be doing something with my life, even if it is, like, part of, like, a job in a bigger company or this. But at the time, it was sit and do nothing, start up a business. So I chose the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Fran, then if we move on, we want to have a little bit of a chat now about what we've all sort of learned throughout the process. So I think there's an interesting one with your situation, because you're working with Queen's and the co-founder of the agency. Can you tell us a little bit about how those two jobs complement each other?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I am so lucky to be in a job with Queen's that I absolutely love. And the reason I became involved with that job in the first place was because I was involved in a tech startup. And throughout my experiences as a student co-founder, I was able then to come into this team where I was advising other student co-founders and entrepreneurs on what to do, what not to do, what I had learned. And now I'm in an even better position to do that and to advise those students based on what I've learned now 2-3 years down the line. So I didn't go straight from uni and jump into my own business. I did, but I didn't do it exclusively. And I think that's something that we have to be really mindful of in this age of hustle culture. It's been very glamorized, sort of going and being broke and sitting in your bedroom and starting up your own business. But we have to be realistic in that that's not actually the story for everybody. And we shouldn't make anybody feel guilty for, like, you know, not doing this side hustle or their full-time job. The reality for so many people is that to be able to come out of university and start your own business and not do something else is very expensive. You know, you need to survive and you need to live, and to start up your own business and to make money straight away is very, very rare. So if you have the energy, if you have the drive to come out of university, go into a job and do something in the evenings and weekends, totally do that. See how it's going. You know, you don't have to risk it all like the likes of these big entrepreneurs on LinkedIn and Twitter say. You don't have to, and it's not realistic for everybody. And I think you have to be very aware of your privilege if you're able to go straight into your own business, maybe not making much money with absolutely no safety blanket, you know. It's a lot harder than people let on, and I don't think we should really glamorize that and pretend it's not an issue of privilege sometimes when it is.
Yeah, absolutely, no, 100%. And there are, I think, people will be aware of the individuals that you mentioned who promote the hustle culture thing. It is one, the whole fake it till you make it idea I absolutely detest. You know, and it doesn't do justice to, you know, really talented people.
The fake it till it's an awkward. It depends on which way you take the fake it till you make it thing, because I think it works really well in terms of confidence.
Yeah.
I think if you fake confidence, then it can work wonders in new business meetings when you're shitting yourself, you know, when you're really scared and you go into like, I'm going to fake that I'm the most confident person in the world here and I really know what I'm talking about. That got me through, and at the start it really did. The whole fake it till you make it when you're showing flashy things on social media and saying, I'm working 23 hours a day, which we all know is just crap. That's annoying.
Yes.
But fake it till you make it can work in some contexts, I think, especially when it comes to your confidence.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think whenever because that whole learning how to pitch is a hugely important bit. And I'm anybody that knows me knows I use far too many sporting analogies, but sportsmen always and women always say, you know, whenever they stop getting nervous when they cross that white line, they know it's time to retire. So, you know, if you're not shitting yourself before you go in to do that pitch, no matter what age you are, you're probably doing the wrong thing because you don't care enough anymore. In my opinion. So I think there's that element of, you know, that last 5-minute panic before you go through the door, no matter how much prep time you've put into the pitch deck, no matter how many times you've rehearsed it in front of the mirror and recorded yourself and changed things, there's always that moment 5 minutes before you get called in that you're thinking, this is rubbish, they're going to hit it. Yeah. Heart beating, palm sweating. That's really healthy. Rather than run away from that, I think we need to encourage people more to run towards that, because first of all, it demonstrates that you care, and it means that you're going to go and give your best shot, because it's when you're on the edge like that that I think we all, most people anyway, I think can do their best things. So I absolutely 100% agree with you there, Fran. Going back to when you started the agency with Chloe, so in the very early days then of running your own business for the first time, what would you say some of the biggest lessons you learned early on?
Oh God, so many. I probably should have gone back and documented them all now in a diary, because really we're still learning every single day. And before we even come on this webinar, I sort of said to you, look, what should I do in this case? And you were like, lesson learned there, Francesca, and it totally is. So we are still learning every day. But I suppose the biggest one that took us the longest to get right, and I still don't even know if we really have it right, in some cases, is pricing. Okay. And I think it's the hardest to get right because it's not like you can just dawdle over and ask your competitors, you know. It's hard to compare and see what other people are charging, and it's about valuing yourself and valuing your time correctly as well. And it's a massive issue in women in particular that we tend to undervalue ourselves and undervalue our time. And that I think that is the hardest lesson, I think, to learn, and the one that did take us the longest is, right, what should we be charging here? Yeah. in our case, it was, what's too little? Is that too little?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to your earlier point, Josh, when you said, when you were freelancing at 15 and you were doing logos for people for 20 quid, right? And when you're 15, 20 pound is like, wow, this is great. And it's exactly the same situation, isn't it? It's your perception of what you need to be paid to have the lifestyle that you want at 15 or at 25 or at 50.
There's a lot of theory that goes into it as well. Like, exactly, like, are you meeting your base needs? Are you feeding yourself? Are the lights on? But then additionally to that, there's also like, well, how much extra value are you able to tack on by being as skilled as you are? Are you accounting for the amount of hours you've spent learning about the subject that you're an expert in? What value are your competitors pricing out at? Are you going over? Are you going under? There's so much to consider when you go into pricing. And
that's the hardest thing, is starting your own business when you're so young and you really haven't worked in maybe an agency or another business beforehand, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a case for Chloe and I. We didn't really know. I mean, we got to learn, but it was something you said, Peter. It was so good the last day we chatted, and you just said, with pricing, you can always come down, but you can't go up. And I remembered that when I left. It really resonated with me, and I was like, God, that was a great nugget of wisdom, Peter.
I've stolen that completely. I've completely stolen that one from...
Just own it. Fake it till you make it, Peter.
Potty might watch this at some point. Potty Fearns, the MD of Wibble, and we did a business... He was on the same business start program that I did with the Ulster Bank, which is another great support network for anybody, by the way, who wants to set up a business. And I was doing a video for them when we all graduated, which was the polite way of moving us out of the free space that the Ulster Bank were giving us and telling us we'd had enough. And we had to go around and ask the people who were graduating what piece of advice would they give to the new cohort of people coming in. And Poddy's pearl of wisdom was get your pricing right from the start, because it's very easy to decrease them, but it's extremely difficult to go the other way. And it's back to the point that both of you have made about understanding the value of what you're delivering versus how much you think you want for it. And that, because that's tainted by so many different things. At 15, you're living at home, you're being fed, there's food in the cupboards, your bed's being made, your laundry's being done. What do you need at that stage? But the value of the work you're doing, creating that logo, is much more than the £20 you're charging for.
100%,
so it's just keeping aware of all that. Josh, can you tell us a little bit about, you mentioned it when we spoke about how important, I mentioned the support network that we had with the Ulster Bank startup program. Can you tell us a little bit about the support network that you and your other co-founders had in that first year that you set up Aura?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, like you were saying, whenever I was freelancing at age 15, I had, a mum and a dad, and I had a bed to go back home to, I had heating, all that. So it allowed me to go out and, do what I needed to do with, fallbacks and safety in place. And I think the same goes because we set up our business while we were in uni, and all three of us had access to student finance, to keep us sort of afloat while we did this. In addition to all the help we had at EPY, and then after that we signed up for BEA, our Belfast Enterprise Academy.
It's a brilliant program.
It's amazing.
Right, I haven't heard of that one.
It's really good.
So Belfast Enterprise Academy is supported by the Belfast City Council, and essentially as a student entrepreneur, if you require mentorship, whether that be in legal, finance, marketing, branding, Belfast Enterprise Academy will fund that for you within their network of mentors, and I refer students onto it every single day.
Okay. Yeah, so all my housemates now are trying to start up business ventures, and I'm like, go BEA. But yeah, all that was great. We had loads of support and all, and then at the same time we also had uni to go back to afterwards, and there was a safety net for us. We're still studying. Whatever goes wrong, the worst thing that could happen is we go back to our studies and get a part-time job or something like that. So going back to what you were talking about with privilege, we were immensely privileged whenever we started this all out. We had everything at our disposal, and I think we would have done well without it, but I think it definitely went a long way to making sure we got to where we're going.
You talked there about the support. I remember, again, I was 40. Started the business when I was 42. It was probably in my mind from I was 40. My wife still maintains it was a midlife crisis. I different to your 15-year-old situation, right? My wife is self-employed as well. We have 3 kids. the usual, all the baggage that comes with being 42. With so mortgages and pensions and all this stuff, you know. And the idea then, I had no reason to leave the job I was in. I loved the job I was doing. I loved the place that I worked. I loved the team that I worked with. I was getting opportunities to travel. But I had this thing that I wanted to do this. And initially it was, why? Why would you risk all of this when the bar that you have to hit in order to keep the lifestyle that you have is really significant. We're not.
It's a lot of pressure.
We're not extravagant people, but I mean, you know, there's still an awful lot of pressure there.
Yeah.
And it was until I realised in a moment of clarity one day, you know, it was like, well, what's the worst that could actually happen if this goes wrong? And you know, I came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that you know, I think I'm still employable.
Yeah.
So, worst case scenario, I try this, it crashes and burns after 6 months. I have to put the tail between the legs and go and get a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's actually the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I might get actually a bit of time off, because if it does crash and burn, I won't have any work to do. So I might burn a bit of savings, but that'll be it. It'll be out of my system. And it was only when I got myself there that I thought, well, okay, let's do this. But then the business support networks were a massive help, because you do feel like you've done some, you know, it's that 5 minutes before you go into pitch again. Every day there was that, what have I done? You know, why did I give that up for this? This is crazy. And that's why I joined those business support programs, because being surrounded by another 20 or 30 people who'd made the decision that you had at different times of their lives, just being in a room with them, we worked out of the same co-working space. Surrounding yourself with the other lunatics sort of makes you feel like less of one.
Yeah.
Totally. I always say my network is the most valuable thing I have. And we're so lucky in Belfast that the entrepreneurship community is really tight and everyone is really supportive and willing to help.
Yeah.
For my first went into startup world in my final year of uni, I was thrown into Catalyst, brilliant organisation.
Yes.
There was the likes of the Go For It programme, Kickstart, the pitching competitions in Queen's, Enterprise SU. The amount of stuff available was insane. And I just thought, God, this is brilliant. You know, so many opportunities to make networks and pitch for funding and get that valuable advice from people that really genuinely wanted to help. And I don't know if there's anywhere else in the world where you would have that amazing support network just so close to you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we talked about, Josh, when we met last week in advance of this, was you said, you mentioned a phrase that stuck with me when you said one of the things you had to do very early on was shed the student ID. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided that had to happen? It's
unfortunate because we're all very proud of being students, and we're all really proud of where we came from. I'm really like patriotic about Ulster. You know, taught me everything I know. But yeah, fair enough. But yeah, like love being a student. Some of the best times I've had in my life. But at the same time, when you're going out into the world of business, student takes on a completely different connotation than it does to you. And I think if I was to meet up with a corporate client and say I am a student, I think 99% of the time they're hearing like alarm bells going off in their head, or their eyes are rolling with cash signs. So I think as a student you're seen as sort of like young and sort of uneducated about all this kind of stuff, inexperienced, and can be taken advantage of.
So I always maintain that you know, every sale is a risk reduction exercise. We talked about this last week, and effectively it's about working out what parts of what your story is could be perceived as a risk, and therefore move you further down the pecking order when it comes to getting the order. So what I'm hearing from you, Josh, is that you decided, okay, that's a thing, much as we're proud of it, and we trying to keep it as part of the founder story, but whenever we're in those commercial discussions, it's something that could be seen as a red flag. I suppose the larger the corporates you tend to go into, I suppose when you're dealing with the startup market, maybe less so, but whenever you're talking to corporate clients, it's okay, well, let's not over egg the student thing, because that might be something they look at and think this is a risk.
Although on the other side, I had a bit of a complex about that. I was about 22, and I remember writing a LinkedIn post being like, you know, I'm only 22 and I have my own business now, but you know, these are all the reasons why this is really placed to my advantage. And a friend of mine phoned me literally 2 minutes after I put up the post, and he owned a very successful corporate company. I said, Francesca, take that down. That's a load of rubbish. If I wanted someone to do my social media marketing, I'd hire a 22 or 23-year-old. And I took it down.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
so it depends what industry you're into.
Well, I think it's there's a
Definitely.
bit about, if you own, you know, you always said from a marketing and branding perspective, you know, you've got to own the story, and if it's an important part of the story,
Yeah.
you've got to find a way to weave it in a way that it remains a positive part of the story.
Definitely, yeah. Because I think like our startup story isn't, you know, it is a big part of it. I think it's quite an impressive part of it that we did start so young, and it does make its way into pitches and things like that. But it's exactly what you said. You know, the industry that you're in lends a lot to how you behave within it. And animation, youth is sort of seen as, okay, well, make room for the more experienced people.
Yeah.
But I think in its place, like what we've done is we've focused on our work. One of my favorite quotes is, if you do good work, that work will become its own currency. And yeah, that's the way I live my life. So, you know, as long as we have a good portfolio, and we have a good, you know, show reel, that will speak volumes for us. Yeah.
We've touched on the next question a little bit, but you know, having the technical skills required to do the jobs you're doing, whether that be managing the influencer campaigns or creating the animation work, you know, is obviously a huge part of what you do, and the experience making videos is a huge part of what we do, and as a software developer or whatever it is that you're doing. How important have you found it is to develop those commercial awareness skills very early, and to keep an eye on making sure you've always got an eye on the commercial side of things, as part of what you do every day?
Okay, it can be quite hard. I mean, what I've always found so valuable to me is, now, people say the word or the phrase "get a mentor" all the time, and it kind of does my head in, because you're like, how do you just like go get a mentor? Like,
Go find one.
seriously,
Yeah.
just like, hi, yeah, will you be my mentor? No, it's so cringe. It's just like, it makes your face go red even thinking about asking that. And even the way people sort of pinpoint, you need a mentor, like go and ask for one and you can bounce all your ideas off them. I used to hate when people say that because I thought, God, what's wrong with me? Like, I find it really hard to like find one and da-da-da. So what I actually then started to realize was, the more I grew my network, the more people I met, but those people were from such various backgrounds and had such a range of expertise and skills. And so actually, the more I thought about it, I went, I don't have a mentor. I have numerous mentors. And I have numerous mentors I go to for different things. And there's different people I would ask for different things that I'm struggling
You
with.
have the finance guy and you have the legal
Exactly,
guy.
I have the legal guy and I
Yeah.
have the marketing, you know, and I have a range of mentors in my life. So, commercial awareness is something that you build upon and you learn every day as you go through starting your own business and building your own business, and you learn different things every day, and that naivety slowly pours out of you the further you go. But being able to have that network of people that you can ask and that you can trust is so important. And you don't have to necessarily go out with the agenda of finding a mentor or finding numerous mentors, but building your network, doing favours for people, helping out people where you can, they'll help you where they can. So that's kind of the advice that I would give in terms of building commercial awareness. You learn it, and unfortunately you have to learn very hard lessons to build that awareness, but as well, if you have enough people that you can ask, that really helps.
Yeah, what about you, Josh, on the commercial awareness side?
100%. It's not something that's ever taught. It is something, like you said, you have to go through it and learn it. I think as well, having the confidence to ask people for help as well, especially considering we are in such a tight community as, you know, entrepreneurs in Belfast even, everyone's willing to lend a hand. Like, if you're looking information about something or you don't know what to do, you know, find someone and ask them.
People find it hard to ask too.
Yeah.
I suppose if people find it hard to ask, a good way to frame it is, look, can I get your feedback on this?
Yeah.
Look, what do you think about this? I have this issue, but like, I'm not really sure. Look, I see that you've been in this industry for ages. I've had this issue. You know, what's your thoughts on that? You know, would this be the right avenue to go down, or am I completely wrong? You know, some people find it hard to be like, can you help me? They feel silly, you know.
One of the lines I trot out fairly recently fairly frequently at presentations is there's a line, Baz Luhrmann always wears sunscreen tune from the early 2000s, and one of the lines that he narrates in that is, you know, advice is a form of nostalgia, and it's like fishing history out of the garbage disposal, wiping away all the nasty bits and recycling it for more than it's worth. And I always use that when I'm starting my presentations to people, because I'm always saying to them, because I always use that filter whenever I'm taking advice from people as well, in that, you know, you've got to make up your own mind about what you're going to do. You don't just necessarily, the job of a mentor isn't to tell you what to do. The job of a mentor or a group of people that you trust is to provide you with the value of their experience, which you then throw together in the pot, mix it up, and come up with your own decision about what is the best course of action to take.
Because it's often they'll say, you know, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
But it might not necessarily be what you would do, but it really helps to have that insight.
Yeah. But we realized that very early on as well, because, I mean, we had a good few mentors, you know, from different organizations, and sometimes the advice conflicts.
Yes.
And then you're left as a business owner wondering, oh, which one do I take?
Which brings me back to the pub chalkboard you see oftentimes, which is the older you get, the more you realise that everyone's winging it.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah.
You know, and there's a temptation the younger you are to think, why has everybody else got the shit together so much?
And it's not that you have to know everything, you just have to know that bit more than your customer.
It takes a degree of confidence to accept that you don't, you know, and to know when to ask for help, and to know finance is my blind spot, and I don't have time or the inclination to learn it as much. I learn what I need to keep myself abreast of what I need to keep abreast of, but in terms of the nitty gritty, I need support. And I'm going to go and try and find someone who can support me.
I think once you realise in life that everyone is just a child pretending to be an adult, everything becomes a little bit easier. Definitely, yeah.
No, I fully subscribe to that. We've talked a little bit about the pricing bits before, so we won't go back over that one, Fran. Again, you've covered that one off, but there's an awful lot of work you do when you're running your own business, and we touched on it there about the different skills that you need. So, as well as the work you do that you can charge for, you've got your prospecting, your admin, your marketing, and the networking that you need to build up those contacts for advice and for business opportunities, then the finance side. From both of your perspectives, if you don't mind us asking, you know, what proportion of the time that you work in the business would you say is actually chargeable?
Oh, see, I've really conflicted on this, because I remember working with a guy one time, and he was really arrogant, and he was like, well, they're making me work this day, so I'm going to bill my thinking time, I'm going to bill my traveling time, I'm going to bill my walking time, I'm going to bill this. I remember just thinking, what the hell is wrong with you? But then I was like, well, am I doing something wrong? Because alternatively, I would have only charged for like a fifth or a sixth of what he was planning to charge for. And again, a part of me was thinking, is that kind of a woman-man thing as well? I wonder, like, are my female friends more inclined to charge for less? I could be completely wrong in that. It's maybe just me. But it's just what I found in my experience.
No, I think there's definitely something there about people undervaluing, you know, the time that goes in from executing a project beginning to end. And I think, you know, as long the market will tell you whether you're too dear or not. Yeah. Ultimately,
true.
Anyway, I suppose one of the mistakes that I know I made before I started the business, was, you know, you think you set yourself on a rate that you'd like to be paid every hour, and you think, why am I sitting here working for somebody else for this when I can go over here and I know I can charge this, and then you do the 40 times that as your calculation about what you can possibly earn, and you think, look how much I can make here, and then you start working for yourself and you think, oh. Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually only doing work that I'm being paid for half the time that I'm actually working, because the other half, I'm doing the admin, I'm at networking events, I'm trying to figure out the invoicing, I'm looking for mentors, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I suppose what I'm trying to get to is there a lesson for anybody starting out here that you can to say, if you have an hourly rate that you're thinking of, whenever you're trying to figure out how much you can earn, just be conscious that you're not going to be able to charge for every hour that you're working.
Yeah, it sort of depends on the industry too, Peter, and we talked about this briefly the last day, and you said some really interesting stuff, but what really resonated with me was that a lot of typical digital marketing agencies and PR agencies like us will charge billable hours, they'll charge for their time. However, I think this was nearly one of the advantages of Chloe and I having not worked for agencies previously, is we just did what we thought was right in terms of pricing, and we thought, okay, well, realistically, that is the rates the influencers are charging us. We're going to charge maybe a markup in that for managing the entire campaign, and we don't work in billable hours. And you had touched on this last time, and it said, well, the better I get at this and the more I do these presentations and put these things together, the quicker I'm going to become. So why then should I actually charge less because I've been faster at my work?
Yeah.
And it's actually been of the same quality or better,
Yes.
because you've grown in that experience. So for me, I don't like that model for that reason.
I hate that model. We get asked regularly, because it's the way people buy video a lot of the time. When we get approached by agencies or we get approached by clients, sometimes they say to me, what's your day rate? And my answer is, we don't have one. Precisely for the reason you said there, because, you know, I think we can get to the right answer quicker than other people. But why should we be paid less for that?
Yeah. Even on a more base note, like, we often get some people who ask us, how much is an animation? And then I come back with 20 questions. How long do you want it? How much animation?
Is it 2D or 3D?
Is it 2D or 3D? Is it?
And you get frustrated, but at the end of the day, it's ignorance on their part too.
Yeah.
They just don't know. And I think sometimes I get frustrated, but then I have to think back, no, actually, right, they know nothing about what I'm doing. It's my job to explain to them.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault. You know, they've asked the initial question, they've maybe worded it a certain way, but how are they meant to know?
Additionally to that, though, then, like, how much value are you bringing to the table by doing that education piece to your clients? Like, you're increasing their knowledge about what they need to
I
know.
wouldn't even have thought of that.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
You should be charging for that too, Fran.
Yeah.
But I never would have thought of that. Never in my life would I have thought of that. As in, like, oh, you're providing value of education. I'm like, no, that's definitely just part of the job.
Well, one of the and it was a lesson I had from a previous business that I worked in, and I was very conscious of not getting dragged into free consultancy. You know, by somebody saying, oh, we've got a problem here and we don't know how to fix it. And whenever you've started your own business, or even long after you've started your own business, the temptation can be, oh, well, I'll come out, sure, and I'll spend a few hours with you. And you'll sit down and you'll help them figure out how to solve the problem. And unfortunately, there are some people who don't behave in the right way. And what they will do is they will think, thank you very much for your time. Now you've invested all that time and effort into showing us how to do it. We're just going to go and get someone really cheap to go and do it for us instead. And this came from an engineering business I was involved in. So I, from the start, was conscious of can you come in and talk to us about half day about our project? And it's like, no, because that's the start of the project. That's costed within the job, is that half day content planning workshop where we go in and do that. So this is how, I'll tell you how we do that, what the agenda might be. But if you want me to do the workshop, give me the order.
Yeah.
That was a learning curve for us. At the start, we were giving away sort of our planned strategy, and this is what we would do, this is who we would use. And then people were just running off and just doing it themselves. And then I was getting frustrated, but I was like, well, I suppose why wouldn't they? So we started taking deposits.
It's free consultancy, it's absolute the worst thing you can possibly do, because there's, back to Josh's point about the value of the education and your experience and knowledge of how the thing gets done, you know, that's taken you time to learn, and to give it away and somebody to go off and use that template and then go, thanks very much, Fran, we're going to use somebody else's. It's just not the right way to behave as far as I can see.
It's one of the reasons I love, like, doing things like this, because I think unless someone tells you about it, everyone gets stung by the deposit thing. Like, eventually someone will come along who doesn't want to pay you, and then you're like, okay, what do I do? On that point, actually, you know, best piece of advice I could give is have your legal in place.
Okay.
I think the first mentor you should probably find is someone who knows how to cover you. Definitely.
And that's as simple as just
yeah.
People hear the word legal sometimes and get terrified and think, you know, big scary premises with lots of glass and people wearing suits and ties and coming out with 50-60 page contracts and stuff, and you're like, no, it's really about nailing down what your project scope is, what you're going to deliver for the price that you've said, when you're going to deliver it, and what your payment terms are, and what the terms of redress are if anything should go wrong.
Well, look at it this way, like, if you're going to war with a stick and someone comes at you with a machine gun, you know who's winning. You know, you need to be prepared.
But at the same time, it is easy to say that too when you start up and you have no budget at all,
That is true.
no money,
But
and
there are some
expensive.
fantastic resources. I don't know if
There are,
either of
there
you have
are.
ever used the NI Business Info
Yeah,
website.
which
Yes,
again,
it
another
is.
great resource.
The amount of templates that are on there, from employment contracts to VAT registrations to those legal documents that say this, and it's insert name here, insert date here, insert deposit percentage stroke amount here. They're hugely valuable templates that are there for you to use, and I would suggest anybody who starts a business uses them from the start.
Yeah. Sometimes it does sort of take you a while to learn, okay, what do I need? And I've been stung by that that one, so maybe now I need to get something into place. Sometimes it does, as you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you don't know that what you're producing actually kind of leaves you in trouble.
Well, policies and procedures develop as a company expands and grows,
totally.
because every time you get stung for something, whether it be a client not paying you, whether it be jobs getting cancelled, whether it be all the things that can go wrong, you don't know how to deal with them until they do. So the policies
you
and
don't
procedures.
know what legal things you have to have in place.
You don't. The policies and procedures folder I have on our shared drive, whenever we started in day one, was a proposal template. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Nice.
And then I had to figure out an employment contract, and then I had to register for VAT, and then registering for VAT, the support network was massive because we were in an environment with people who'd already done it. So instead of me having to go and pay fortunes to some financial advisor to find out how to do this, I knew the guy sitting 2 desks away from me had registered for VAT 2 months ago. So it was like, can I have a coffee? I'll buy you a coffee. Can I buy you a coffee? You registered. Can you tell me how that works? It sounds utterly terrifying to me. And then they said, it's fairly easy, HMRC website, Okay, it's not as terrifying anymore.
Yeah.
But you don't ever know, because you don't know what question you're going to get asked next or what problem you're going to run into next. And it's just knowing where to look when you do, I think, is the critical part of it.
There isn't an exhaustive list either. You'll think you've all your bases covered, and then someone will hit you with a completely out of left field issue. Yeah.
I remember when I started, I spoke to a guy in Lisburn. He runs a friend of mine for years. He runs a signage and graphics company that I've used in my previous jobs for 10, 15 years. And I went out and spoke to as many of small business owners as I could before I started the business myself, and said, what advice would you give me? And his one piece of advice he gave me was, sort out your payment terms and things, because there is nothing more certain than you will get stung at some point. Might happen first month, might happen third year, might happen fifth year, but at some point someone won't pay you.
Yeah.
And you need to know how to deal with it. So speaking to other people who've done it before is also a hugely sort of valuable thing to do, isn't it? So, one of the things I wanted to touch on as well with you, Josh, when I went to see you speak at the UU event about Enterprise Placement Week, which we spoke about earlier, one of the things you said was, you are not your work. Can you explain for the viewers here tonight what you meant by that and why you think it's important?
Well, yeah, I think, Francesca, you brought up something really important last time we spoke, which was what you do contributes a lot to who you are. Although I think where I was coming from when I said that was, it isn't everything who you are. I think especially as creatives, and you can probably vouch for this too, you pour a lot of who you are into what you do, especially in the art scene, the animation scene. And I think whenever you're starting up your own enterprise, that can get in the way. You want to do good work and have fun doing what you're doing. At the same time, you do have to make ends meet. You have to meet the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to be able to feed yourself. And there's another side to it as well, is you're not your work in terms of, the value that you bring as a human being is not dependent on whether or not you fail at what you do.
Absolutely.
It's okay to fail. Failure is a big part of what we all do, and it's important. And letting yourself feel like less of a human being or less valuable because something has happened to you that you can't control, or something has gone wrong, it's important to check yourself there and make sure that your head is in the right place, because that's where everything begins and ends. Yeah. So
what I took from that, and the thing that really resonated with me when I heard you say it, was, because I used to be really guilty. I used, I spoke about this, whenever we send a video draft to a customer and you don't hear back for maybe 24 hours or 48 hours, and your first thought is they hate it. They absolutely hate it. And I don't understand why I've done such a bad job, and I'm now a bad person because they hate the video that we've made for them. And you realise that actually next week when they contact you, it's just that they had 29 other things going on and they were just busy, and they email you back and say, no, it's good. And that's what stuck with me was, you will do work that people don't like.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. There's so much subjectivity, like, because you could make something that you think it looks amazing. In fact, actually, there was a piece of work we did for a client that I sent to one of my housemates to just say, hey, do you think this is good to send? And they were like, it was a piece of toast on a plate or something that I'd rendered out, and they were like, were you making toast today? What's this? So it was a photorealistic piece of toast. We sent it off to the client. Not happy with it at all. So what we do is so subjective. You really have to have a thick skin about what you put out into the world, or it's going to bite you. Like, it really is.
Okay. Does that come down again? To again the commercial awareness, but at the start about defining project scope and feedback loops and all that, to make sure that almost, I know the process we follow with our clients, we try and get to a point before we do much of the heavy lifting in an edit that they fully understand exactly what this thing is going to look and feel like before we engage in doing the heavy lifting of combining audio and visuals and B-roll and effects and things, because changes after that become very difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
And involve a lot of time and mean ultimately you end up working for nothing eventually. So is that about being aware of our project scope that says you can't get a Rolls Royce for the price of a Ford. I think so. The amount that we have packaged your project up determines the amount of, much as creatives we want to keep going because we know there's more we can do with this. Yeah, you have to be conscious of this is the bucket of work that you've paid for, and the bucket's full. So this is where it stops. I
always describe relationships between clients as there are two-way relationships. I think there's the commonality of thinking, oh, this is a one-way thing, they're coming to us looking this. But you will have needs from your client as well. And I think one of the things you need to do at the very beginning is sit them down and say, right, this is our process. This is what we're going to do. Because we've got stung in the past where we've gone to clients and they've said, okay, we want this animation done. We want it done in 3 weeks and we want it done for £300. And we're like, okay, fine. And it's stung us completely. I think you need to have the confidence to say, this is the way we're going to do things. This is the way we do things. And the acceptance to say that if they're not willing to fall in that, then you don't have to work with them. Yeah. Like you were saying last time we spoke, you can fire your client. If they're asking for things that are completely beyond your remit, you don't have to work with them. And it's okay to make that distinction. Okay. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everybody that's watching has too. Just a few things to wrap up for you both. So knowing what you both know now about the co-founder, self-employment, freelancing, working for yourself journey, whatever you choose to call it, would you make the same decision again? If we start with you, Fran.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if nothing else, you've learned so much. You said worst case scenario if this all goes. I mean, my frisbee tits up. Can I say this?
Yes. Oh, we've had worse than that on here, Fran. You needn't worry about that.
Well, then, you've learned so much, and you can always go back to a job, really, because the skills and the knowledge you've learned and the experience will just pay off. Yeah. So, I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, do I think it's something you really need to think about before you commit to it? Totally. I mean, my ambitions for after university were go travel the world. And I always thought that if that wasn't going to happen, it might be a relationship that kept me in this country, not realising it would be two businesses. Yeah. Nice. And sort of I look back and think, maybe should I have taken a year or two and done a load of travelling first and then started up? But then by the time I got back, the business idea would have been taken by somebody else anyway, and we wouldn't have been the first. So I'd say, it can be very easy to grab an opportunity with both hands and run with it, but actually look at it holistically in terms of how you want your life to pan out as well. What do you want from your life, and what are your goals outside of work, and how do they feed into each other? And that's something that's really hard to get right. And again, don't want to go too hard at the woman thing, but especially if you're really focusing on career, running your own business, and maybe not thinking about any of your relationships, if you really, really want kids, like, let's face it, women have a bit more of a timeline too. So how much you can let your career take over, or traveling take over, or, you know, there's so many things you have to think about too. So yes, take those opportunities, start your own business if you want to, but do think about it as well, and don't think it's something you can just like sort of fob off. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a long-winded answer and maybe a bit
it's
packaged.
No, I mean, it touched on, you touched on a few things there. And one of the things we spoke about when we met the last time was, and I fully subscribe to the view of, you know, do what feels right to do now. And I think sometimes people of every age can put themselves under too much pressure, thinking too far ahead about where they want to. We spoke about this, Josh, quite candidly about, you know, putting themselves under too much pressure about, you know, having it all mapped out about where they want to be in 6 or 7 years. People say to me, is this your forever thing with Blue Sky Video Marketing? I don't know. You know, at the minute, I think it might be, but I mean, as soon as it isn't, it won't be.
Yeah.
You know, it feels right now, and as long as it feels like the right thing to do, I will keep doing it. But if at any point in the future it feels like something else is the right thing to do, then that's what I'll do. And you spoke about that before, Josh, about somebody asking you that question, I think, before, about what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Exactly. Yeah, it was in uni, and one of I think our visiting professors asked me, you know, what are you looking to do when you leave uni? Which I think the question should have been, who are you now? Like, what are you doing now? But it got me thinking about what I wanted to do, and I think that sort of scared me into, I need to figure this out now. But yeah, like, I think that question sort of kicked me into gear. I think it might be one of the reasons that I decided to set up my own company, because it got me thinking about opportunities that were available at the moment. But it's exactly like you said, you know, like 10 years down the line, who knows where I'll be, and that's okay. You know, it's good to have a plan. I mean, if you know me at all, I will tell you, do not start anything up unless you have a plan for it. But one of the first things we were told was, you know, whenever you're writing your actual business plan document, as soon as you put the final full stop on the end of that, it's out of date.
Yeah.
You know,
Somebody said to me once, I've never had a plan that went to plan. Yeah. But you still need one.
Well, that's the whole thing, because we were earlier talking about business being a risk management exercise, and it is just that. It's sort of like falling gracefully, like you're going where the world is taking you, but you're doing it with good direction. I think that's what's important.
Okay.
God, that sounds ideal, doesn't
What
it?
was that line? I'm going to steal that one. I'm going to steal that one, Josh. What was that? Falling. You're gonna
Falling with grace. I don't know.
something like that.
God.
Something like the falling with grace line seems like a good time to wrap this up. So, thank you very much, Francesca, and thanks for Josh for coming along for the first one of 2022. We'll be publishing the details of the content calendar for the rest of the year over the course of the next few weeks. So, thanks very much, everybody, for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.